Amanda, 42 female. I live in a quiet condo downtown that I bought with my own money, a sanctuary filled with books and the faint scent of jasmine. As a financial advisor, I spend my days helping people secure their futures, a skill I ironically extended to my family for far too long. They saw my success not as something I built, but as a resource they were entitled to, and it took one bitter comment at my own birthday dinner to finally make me see the truth. This is the story of how I stopped being the family bank and started being myself. It's about the moment I realized that my financial support was not love, but a chain, and I was the only one with the key to break it. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The restaurant was one of my favorites, a small Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candlelight that danced on the wine glasses. It was my 42nd birthday, and I had wanted something simple, something intimate. Just my mother, Helen, my sister, Sarah, and her daughter, my niece, Chloe. The men in their lives were conveniently absent. Sarah's husband was on a boys' trip, and my mother was long widowed. So it was just us four, a dynamic I should have known better than to orchestrate. For years, these gatherings had a predictable rhythm. My accomplishments would be acknowledged with polite but dismissive smiles, then the conversation would pivot to their needs, their dramas, their wants. I was the stable, reliable backdrop to their more interesting lives. Tonight, I had hoped would be different. I was paying, of course. I always paid. I had reserved the best table by the window and even pre-ordered a bottle of their finest Chianti. I wanted to celebrate to feel celebrated. The first hour was deceptively pleasant. We talked about Chloe's first semester at college, my mother's garden club, and Sarah's new yoga certification. I listened, asked questions, and played my role as the attentive daughter and aunt. I bought Chloe a new laptop for her studies last month, helped Sarah with the down payment for her yoga studio 2 years ago, and I manage my mother's retirement portfolio for free, ensuring she lives comfortably. I was, in every sense of the word, the provider, the silent partner in all their successes. The waiter brought out the tiramisu with a single candle flickering in the center. As they sang a lukewarm happy birthday, I closed my eyes and made a wish. It was a simple, private wish, for a little more recognition, a little more genuine affection. When I opened my eyes, Chloe was scrolling through her phone, a bored expression on her face. Sarah was already eyeing the waiter for the check, even though she knew it was coming to me. My mother, Helen, was smiling, but it was the same placid, non-committal smile she wore for every occasion. "Make a wish, honey," my mother prompted, as if I hadn't already. I blew out the candle, and the small flame vanished into a wisp of smoke. Sarah clapped twice, a perfunctory sound. "So, another year older, Amanda. Any prospects on the horizon? You're not getting any younger." It was the opening salvo, the casual, cutting remark disguised as sisterly concern. I forced a smile. "I'm not really looking, Sarah. I'm happy with my life, my career." This was when Chloe, my 19-year-old niece, looked up from her phone, her eyes scanning me with the casual disdain only a teenager can truly master. She let out a small, unimpressed sigh. "Wow, still single at your age. That's sad." The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. They weren't delivered with malice, but with a kind of thoughtless, factual cruelty. It was a judgment, plain and simple. My life, my choices, my independence, all of it was distilled down to one word: sad. I waited for someone to defend me. I looked at my sister, Sarah, the woman whose business I had helped fund, but she just shrugged, a silent agreement with her daughter. Then I looked at my mother, Helen. Our eyes met across the table, and in that moment I saw not a flicker of support. No maternal instinct to protect her eldest daughter from such a callous remark. Instead, she just nodded slowly, a single, devastating gesture of confirmation. "She has a point, Amanda," my mother said softly, her voice laced with that familiar tone of gentle disappointment. "It's not natural to be alone all the time." In that instant, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. It was the culmination of 1,000 small cuts, a lifetime of being taken for granted, of my worth being measured only by what I could provide. My single status wasn't the issue. The issue was that to them, my life was a failure because it didn't fit their narrow, traditionalist view. My career, my financial independence, my self-sufficiency, none of it mattered. It was all just a sad consolation prize for not having a man. The irony was suffocating. The very independence that funded their lives, their dreams, was the thing they pitied me for. The laptop Chloe was browsing on, the yoga studio Sarah boasted about, the comfortable retirement my mother enjoyed, all of it was built on the foundation of my sad, single life. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. The anger I felt was cold and silent, a block of ice forming in my chest. I simply picked up my wine glass and looked at them, one by one. I saw my niece, a girl who had never worked a day in her life, passing judgment from a throne I had paid for. I saw my sister, who championed female empowerment at her yoga studio but couldn't stand to see her own sister empowered without a husband. And I saw my mother, who had taught me to be strong and independent, now telling me that strength was a liability. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a CEO who has just decided to liquidate a failing asset. They mistook it for grace, for me taking their comments in stride. Sarah looked relieved, probably thinking she had gotten away with it again. "Well, anyway," she said, changing the subject, "Chloe's tuition payment is due next week. I'll need you to make the transfer." "Of course," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "I'll take care of it." I paid the bill, a hefty sum that didn't even make me blink. I drove them home, listening to them chatter about their plans for the weekend, plans I was implicitly expected to finance. When I dropped them off, my mother leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Don't mind them, dear," she whispered, a classic case of too little, too late. "We just worry about you." I didn't respond. I just nodded and watched them walk up the path to the house that I helped my sister buy. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my quiet, perfect condo, the silence a comfort rather than a curse. I thought about the dinner, I thought about the nod. My mother's nod was the real betrayal. It was the final confirmation that I was not a daughter to be proud of, but a problem to be solved. And as I sat there, the ice in my chest began to melt, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. They saw me as a utility, a resource, an open line of credit with a heartbeat. That night, I decided to close the account. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call a friend to vent. I looked up the 24/7 customer service number for my bank. The decision was made. By morning, their world would be very, very different. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the dinner replayed in my mind not as a singular incident, but as the season finale of a long-running show. A show where I was the perpetual supporting character in my own life story, my plotlines always secondary to the main cast, my mother, my sister, and my niece. Their casual cruelty wasn't new. It was a well-practiced art form, refined over decades of me allowing it to happen. I had built the stage, supplied the props, and paid for the tickets, all while they delivered lines that slowly chipped away at my self-worth. I remembered my college graduation. I was the first in our family to get a master's degree, an MBA in finance. I graduated with honors, my name called to a smattering of applause. When I found my family afterward, my diploma in hand, my mother's first words were, "That's wonderful, dear. Now you can find a good husband with a stable job." My achievement was instantly reframed as a stepping stone to marriage. My sister, Sarah, had simply rolled her eyes, muttering something about how she didn't need a fancy degree to be happy, a jab that was clearly meant to imply that I did. At the time, she was dating the man she would eventually marry, and in their eyes, she had already won the real prize. I had a degree, she had a partner. The scoreboard was clear. A few years later, when I bought my first apartment, it was another milestone they managed to diminish. It was a modest one-bedroom, but it was mine. I had saved relentlessly, working 60-hour weeks at my first junior analyst job. I invited them over for a small housewarming party. Sarah walked through the rooms and commented on how small it was. "It's a good starter place, I guess," she'd said, sniffing disdainfully. "But you'll want something bigger when you have a family." My mother echoed the sentiment, suggesting paint colors that would appeal to a masculine eye. as if the entire purpose of my home was to be bait for a future husband. There was never a moment of pure celebration for my accomplishment on its own terms. It was always viewed through the lens of what I lacked: a man, a family, a normal life. The pattern was insidious. When I got a major promotion at 30, the one that finally pushed my salary into 6 figures, I told them the news over a Sunday dinner. After a moment of stunned silence, Sarah's immediate response was, "Well, don't let it intimidate men. Guys don't lick. It when a woman makes more than them." My mother nodded in agreement, adding a cautionary tale about a friend's daughter whose career success had supposedly left her lonely. They weren't celebrating my hard work. They were warning me that my success was a social handicap. Meanwhile, I was quietly paying off the high-interest credit card debt Sarah had racked up from a failed online boutique venture. I was the responsible one, the successful one, but in our family's twisted narrative, I was also the one to be pitied. The most glaring example came 5 years ago. I had been dating someone for about a year, a kind and intelligent man named Robert. He was an architect, and we connected on a level I had never experienced before. I brought him to my mother's house for Thanksgiving, nervous but hopeful. My family was polite to his face, but their questions were like a forensic investigation. They asked about his income, his family background, his 5-year plan. It felt less like an introduction and more like a financial audit. Robert was uncomfortable, and I was mortified. After he left, the verdict was delivered. Sarah thought he wasn't ambitious enough for me. My mother felt his family wasn't on our social level. They systematically dismantled him, not based on how he treated me or how happy he made me, but on a checklist of superficial criteria. A few weeks later, Robert and I broke up. The pressure had created a crack in our relationship, and we couldn't repair it. When I told my family, there was a palpable sense of relief from them. "It's for the best," my mother had said, patting my hand. "You deserve someone who can truly match you." But what they meant was someone who could match their expectations, someone who would add to the family's perceived status. The irony was that I was the one who had built that status. The comfortable lifestyle they enjoyed was funded by my intimidating salary. Sarah's kids went to private summer camps because I wrote the checks. My mother could afford her biannual cruises because I managed her investments and supplemented her pension. They criticized me for not having a man, yet they were utterly dependent on my ability to provide for them, an ability I had cultivated by focusing on my career instead of my dating life. This history of dismissals was the context for Chloe's comment at my birthday dinner. Her words were not just the thoughtless jab of a teenager, they were the echo of a family mantra, a belief system passed down from mother to daughter. I was the anomaly, the spinster aunt, the cautionary tale, and my role was to accept this narrative with a gracious smile and then open my wallet. For 20 years, I had been absorbing these little poison darts, telling myself it was just how they are. I made excuses for them. Sarah was insecure about her own financial struggles. My mother was from a different generation. Chloe was just a kid. But the nod, my mother's silent, solidifying nod, had shattered all those excuses. It was a moment of pure, unvarnished truth. They were not just thoughtless, they were deliberate. They were not just dismissive, they were parasitic. The anger that had been a cold block of ice was now a raging fire. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the utter lack of respect, the complete disregard for my feelings, my life, my accomplishments. They had happily cashed the checks from the bank of Amanda while simultaneously devaluing its CEO. They wanted the benefits of my independence without ever validating the life I had built to achieve it. As I lay there, the sky outside my window beginning to lighten, I knew I couldn't go on like this. The financial ties were the only ones they seemed to respect, the only language they truly understood. So that would be the language I would use to respond. It was time to teach them the true meaning of the word independent. It was time for them to learn what my sad, single life actually paid for, and the first lesson would begin in the morning. The sun began to stream through my blinds, but I hadn't slept. My mind was a whirlwind of calculations and memories, each one reinforcing the decision I had made in the pre-dawn hours. For years, I had operated under the illusion that my financial support was a gift, an expression of love for my family. But sitting there in the stark light of morning, I understood it was an unspoken contract, and I was the only one honoring my side of the deal. My obligation was to provide. Theirs was to give me the bare minimum of love and respect, and they had just defaulted in the most spectacular way. So I decided to do what I do best. I conducted an audit. I turned my professional skills, the very ones they so easily dismissed, onto my own life. I opened my laptop and began to meticulously comb through years of financial records, bank statements, and credit card bills. I wanted to see it all, to quantify the hidden costs of being the family ATM. I needed to see numbers in black and white, to strip away the emotion and look at the cold, hard data of my generosity. It was an exercise in self-inflicted pain, but it was necessary. I needed to build an unshakable case, not for them, but for myself. I needed to know, down to the last cent, what my silence and compliance had truly cost me. The first file I opened was labeled Family Support. It was a spreadsheet I had kept for tax purposes, but it soon became a monument to my own naivete. The entries started small. 10 years ago, it was helping Sarah with her car payment one month when she was a little short. It was buying my mother a new dishwasher when hers broke. It was paying for Chloe's braces. These were things you do for family, I had told myself. But the frequency and the amounts had escalated over time, tracking perfectly with the growth of my career. I tallied it up. The down payment for Sarah's house, $50,000. It had been framed as a loan, but there was no contract, no repayment schedule, and not a single dollar had ever been paid back. The seed money for her yoga studio, another $30,000. She called it an investment, but I had never seen a share of the profits, which I suspected were meager at best. Then there were the monthly expenses, the insidious, recurring costs that had become so routine I barely noticed them anymore. I was paying the family cell phone plan for all of us, a bill that ran close to $250 a month. I was covering the insurance on Sarah's car because she said it was cheaper to bundle it with mine. And Chloe, my beautiful, sharp-tongued niece. Chloe's file was the most staggering. From the moment she was born, I had been her fairy godaunt. I opened a college savings account for her, a $529 plan that I had diligently contributed to every single month for 18 years. The balance was now well over $150,000, more than enough to cover her entire undergraduate degree at the state university she was attending. But that wasn't all. I found the receipts for the designer prom dress, the multiple summer camps, the brand new laptop for college, the monthly allowance I deposited into her debit account for books and supplies. An account that I now realized was funding a lifestyle of weekend trips and expensive brunches I saw on her social media. The debit card for that account was linked directly to one of my own checking accounts, an arrangement I had set up years ago for convenience. It was a lifeline I had provided, and she had no idea where it came from. She likely thought it was funded by her parents. Then there was my mother. My financial support for her was more subtle but just as significant. I had taken over her portfolio after my father passed away. He had left her with a modest nest egg, but it wouldn't have been enough to sustain her lifestyle for 2 decades. Through careful investment and management, I had grown that nest egg substantially. I didn't charge her a single cent for my services, saving her thousands of dollars a year in management fees she would have paid to any other advisor. Furthermore, I quietly supplemented her income, a direct deposit of $1,000 every month to cover what her pension and Social Security didn't. This money paid for her cruises, her garden club fees, her ability to live without financial worry. As I added up the numbers, the total on my screen grew to an astronomical figure. Over the past decade alone, I had spent over $400,000 on them. This didn't even include the lost income from the pro bono financial management or the compounded interest I could have earned if that money had been invested in my own retirement fund. The number was sickening. It represented a future I had sacrificed for them, a bigger home for myself, more travel, and earlier retirement. I had been systematically liquidating my own future to fund their present. And what had I gotten in return? Pity, disdain, a sad little nod at a birthday dinner. The financial audit was devastating, but it was also liberating. It stripped away any lingering guilt or doubt I had about the decision I was about to make. This was not an act of anger anymore, it was a corporate restructuring. They were non-performing assets, and I was cutting them loose. The numbers didn't lie. I had enabled a culture of dependency and entitlement, and in doing so, I had allowed them to see me as a function, not a person. My worth was tied to a wire transfer. My love was measured in dollar signs. I looked at the specific accounts. Chloe's debit card was the easiest and most immediate target. It was my account under my name. I had simply added her as an authorized user. Revoking that access was a few clicks away. The family phone plan was in my name. A simple call would be all it took to remove their lines. The monthly transfer to my mother could be stopped with a keystroke. The larger issues, like the loan for Sarah's house, were more complex, but for now, I would focus on the immediate lifelines. I wasn't just cut. Ting them off, I was reclaiming my life, my future, my self-respect. One account at a time. The first step was to pick up the phone and make a call. The bank opened at 8 a.m. I looked at the clock. It was 7:15. I had 45 minutes to prepare for the beginning of my new life. With the audit complete and the staggering numbers staring back at me from the laptop screen, the emotional fog of hurt and anger began to clear, replaced by a sharp, methodical focus. My office was my sanctuary, the one place where I was in complete control. I made a fresh cup of black coffee, sat at my desk, and began to map out my strategy. This wasn't just about cutting off funds. It was about surgically and systematically dismantling the entire financial ecosystem I had built around my family. I had to be precise, ensuring there were no loopholes, no backdoors, no way for them to reestablish the connections I was about to sever. I was tracing every lifeline I had extended, and I was preparing to cut each one cleanly. My first priority was to create a clear inventory of every financial link between us. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and drew a simple diagram. My name was in a circle in the center. Branching out from it were 3 other circles: Helen, Sarah, and Chloe. I then began drawing lines, each representing a financial tie, annotating them with the type of support and the action required to terminate it. The line to Chloe was the thickest, with the most immediate vulnerabilities. First, the debit card. It was linked to a secondary checking account I maintained specifically for this purpose. The account was solely in my name, making this the easiest cut. Action: call the bank and freeze the card, effective immediately. Then, revoke her status as an authorized user. Second, the college fund. The 529 plan was in my name, with Chloe listed as the beneficiary. While I couldn't just take the money back without a penalty, I had the power to change the beneficiary. I could change it to myself, or even to a future, hypothetical child of my own. The immediate step, however, was to halt all future payments and disbursements from the account. I would not be paying for her spring semester tuition. Action: log into the investment portal and cancel the upcoming tuition payment. Send a formal request to put a hold on all distributions, pending a beneficiary review. Next, I focused on the line to my sister, Sarah. This was more complicated. The $50,000 loan for her house was undocumented, a verbal agreement made in a moment of sisterly goodwill. Legally, recovering it would be nearly impossible without a lengthy and ugly court battle, something I wanted to avoid. I marked it as a loss, a very expensive lesson learned. However, the other ties were more tangible. The car insurance policy was under my name. Action: call my insurance agent and have her and her vehicle removed from my policy at the end, off the current billing cycle. I would send her a formal email to notify her she had 30 days to secure her own coverage. The family cell phone plan was also in my name. Action: call the provider and switch her line, her husband's line, and Chloe's line to a separate, pay-your-own-way plan. They would be responsible for the bill moving forward. This would be effective immediately. The disruption would be instant. Finally, I turned to the line connecting me to my mother, Helen. This was the one that gave me a moment's pause. Despite her betrayal, she was still my mother. But the nod had been a clear sign that she had chosen her side. My support was enabling her to passively approve of the disrespect I received. The $1,000 monthly supplement was a direct transfer from my savings account. Action: log into my online banking and cancel the recurring payment. The next one was scheduled for the first of the month, just a few days away. The pro bono management of her investment portfolio was a more delicate issue. I had a fiduciary responsibility. I couldn't just abandon it. Action: I would draft a formal letter stating that I would be relinquishing my role as her financial manager in 60 days. This would give her ample time to find a new, paid advisor. I would provide her with a full, transparent accounting of her assets and a list of reputable firms in her area. It was professional, ethical, and completely impersonal. As I mapped it all out, a sense of calm washed over me. This was my world. Logic, strategy, execution. This was the work that had given me the very independence they mocked. Every action I planned was legal, justified, and, in a way, long overdue. I was not destroying them. I was simply forcing them to stand on their own 2 feet. I was handing them the responsibility for their own lives, a responsibility I had been shouldering for them for far too long. With my plan laid out, I began the execution. It was 7:55 a.m. I practiced the conversation for the bank in my head. I would be calm, polite, and firm. No emotion. This was a simple business transaction. I was a client closing a line of credit. I organized the documents on my desktop: account numbers, policy details, login credentials for the various portals. I was preparing for a clean sweep. As the clock ticked closer to 8:00 a.m., I thought about the life I was reclaiming. The $400,000 was gone, a sunk cost. But the future cash flow, the thousands of dollars a month I was pouring into their lives, that was mine now. That money could fund a trip to Japan I'd always dreamed of. It could be invested for my own, even more secure, retirement. It could be donated to a charity I cared about. It could be anything I wanted it to be. The possibilities felt endless. For the first time in years, I was looking at my own financial future, without seeing the shadows of my family's needs stretching over it. The clock on my computer screen flashed 8:00 a.m. I picked up my phone, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. I dialed the bank's priority customer service line. A pleasant voice answered on the second ring. "Thank you for calling Premier Banking. My name is Susan. How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath. "Hello, Susan," I said, my voice even and clear. "My name is Amanda. I need to report a debit card as lost and have it frozen immediately. And then I have a few other account changes I'd like to make." The first domino was about to fall. The conversation with Susan at the bank was refreshingly simple. There was no judgment, no emotional subtext, just a series of professional questions and actions. I provided Chloe's debit card number and calmly stated that it had been compromised and needed to be deactivated immediately. Within 90 seconds, Susan confirmed it was done. "The card is now frozen, Ms. Amanda," she said. "No further transactions will be approved. We can issue a new one to your home address." "No, thank you," I replied smoothly. "Please just remove the authorized user, Chloe, from the account entirely. I won't be needing a card for her." There was a pause filled with the soft clicking of a keyboard. "Okay," Susan said, her tone unchanged. "The user has been removed. Is there anything else?" I proceeded to cancel the recurring monthly transfer to my mother's account. Again, it was handled with professional efficiency. By the time I hung up the phone at 8:15 a.m., 2 of the major financial lifelines had been severed. It felt anticlimactic, yet deeply profound. Years of obligation, erased in a 10-minute phone call. Next, I logged into the investment portal for Chloe's 529 plan. With a few clicks, I canceled the pending disbursement for her spring semester tuition. An automated message popped up, asking me to confirm. I clicked yes without hesitation. I then drafted a quick, formal email to the plan administrator, requesting the necessary paperwork to change the beneficiary, citing changed personal circumstances. The final call of the morning was to my telecommunications provider. This one took slightly longer, navigating a phone tree designed to keep customers from leaving. But I was patient. When I finally reached a representative, I was polite but firm. I explained that I wanted to change my family plan. My line would remain, but the other 3 lines, Sarah's, her husband S, and Chloe's, were to be separated onto their own account. The representative informed me that the account holder for the new account would need to call in and accept financial responsibility. "That's perfectly fine," I said. "They will be in touch. Please make the change effective immediately." He confirmed that within the hour, their service would be restricted until they set up their own billing. By 8:40 a.m., it was all done. I leaned back in my chair and felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy. The system I had created, the one that had been draining me for years, was dismantled. I had built the cage, and I had just opened the door and walked out. Now, all I had to do was wait. I knew it wouldn't be long. The first ripple effect likely happened around lunchtime. Chloe, probably trying to buy an overpriced salad or a coffee on campus, would have found her card declined. Her first reaction wouldn't be panic, but annoyance. She would assume it was a glitch, a temporary error. She would probably text her mother, Sarah, complaining about how Aunt Amanda's card isn't working. Sarah, in turn, would text me a casual, almost demanding message. "Hey, Chloe's card isn't working. Can you check on it?" I saw the message pop up on my phone's lock screen around 12:30 p.m. and ignored it. An hour later, another text from Sarah. "Amanda, did you see my message? Chloe needs to buy her textbooks." A blatant lie, I knew. I had paid for her textbooks through a direct purchase from the university bookstore a month ago. The frustration in her tone was already escalating. I continued to ignore it. The silence, I knew, would be more infuriating to her than any angry response. The real chaos would have started later in the afternoon. Sarah, trying to call me to complain, would have discovered her phone service was suspended. Her husband's too. This would trigger genuine panic. The 2 lifelines they used every single day, money and communication, were suddenly choked off. The world they knew, a world cushioned by my money and managed by my diligence, had vanished. The phone calls started at 3:17 p.m. They came from a number I didn't recognize, likely a friend's phone or a landline. I let the first one go to voicemail, then the second, and the third. I watched my phone screen light up again and again. The calls were frantic, one after another with no pause in between. I counted them. 15, 16, 23. It was a digital tantrum. Sarah was accustomed to immediate gratification, to having her problems solved with a single text message to me. This denial of access, this complete and total silence, was something she had never experienced from me before. In between the calls, a flood of text messages came through from my mother, who clearly still had a working phone for now. Her messages started with concern. "Amanda, Sarah is trying to reach you. Is everything okay?" They quickly escalated to confusion and then to accusation. "Sarah says her phone isn't working and Chloe is stranded without money. What is going on? You need to fix this." And finally, to command, "Amanda, this has gone far enough. Call your sister immediately." My mother's messages revealed the core of the problem. She didn't see me as a person who might be hurt or have her own reasons. She saw me as a malfunctioning utility that needed to be fixed to restore the family's comfort. Her concern was not for me, but for the disruption of the services I provided. I let them stew in their self-created panic for several hours. I went about my day. I had a productive meeting with a client, I ate a healthy lunch, and I went for a walk in the park. With every missed call and ignored text, I felt a layer of resentment and obligation sloughing off. I was no longer their emergency contact, their financial safety net, their problem solver. I was just Amanda, a 42-year-old woman enjoying a Tuesday afternoon. At 6:00 p.m., after the 31st missed call, I decided it was time. I knew Sarah would be incandescent with rage, a pressure cooker of entitlement ready to explode. I was ready for it. I was calm. I was prepared. I poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir, sat on my comfortable sofa, and on the 30-second call, I finally answered the phone. Inevitable, how dare you? The moment I answered, I didn't even have a chance to say hello. Sarah's voice, shrill and ragged with fury, exploded through the phone. How dare you? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a ballistic missile of rage launched from a place of pure, unadulterated entitlement. I held the phone slightly away from my ear, took a calm sip of my wine, and waited for her to run out of breath. "What is wrong with you?" she shrieked, the sound distorted by her anger. "Chloe was stuck on campus with no money. She had to borrow cash from a friend to get home. My phone is shut off. What did you do?" I let the silence hang in the air for a beat, letting her words echo in the space between us. For years, I had been the one to soothe her, to calm her down, to promise to fix whatever problem she was facing. This time, I offered no comfort. "I didn't do anything, Sarah," I said, my voice measured and calm. "I simply made some changes to my own personal accounts. They are, after all, mine." Her response was a sputtering, incredulous laugh. "Your accounts? You cut Chloe off, you shut off my phone. This isn't just about your accounts, Amanda, this is about family. This is about responsibility." The hypocrisy was so thick I could have choked on it. "Let's talk about responsibility, Sarah," I replied, my voice still even, but now with an edge of steel. "Responsibility is paying your own bills. Responsibility is funding your own child's lifestyle. Responsibility is managing your own household finances. For the past 10 years, I have been taking on your responsibilities, and I have decided to stop." "We had an arrangement," she yelled. "You have the money, you're supposed to help us. That's what family does." "Family also treats each other with respect," I shot back, the dam of my composure finally beginning to crack. "Family doesn't mock you at your own birthday dinner. Family doesn't dismiss your entire life's work. A mother doesn't nod in agreement when her granddaughter calls her other daughter sad for being single." There was a sudden, sharp silence on her end. I had hit the nerve. I had brought up the source of it all, the one cruel moment that had finally severed the chain. "Oh, so that's what this is about," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "You're throwing a tantrum because a teenager made a harmless comment? Chloe didn't mean anything by it. You're being overly sensitive." "It wasn't just Chloe, was it, Sarah? It was you, shrugging as if you agreed. And it was Mom, nodding. It was the final confirmation of what I've known for years. You don't respect me. You respect my bank account. And the access to that account has now been permanently revoked." I could hear her breathing, ragged and furious. Then another voice came on the line. It was my mother, Helen. Her tone was one of deep disappointment, the one she had perfected over years to inflict maximum guilt. "Amanda, this is not the way to handle things," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You have hurt your sister and your niece deeply. You are tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Mom," I said, the pain of her betrayal still fresh. "I understood you perfectly when you nodded. You agreed with them. You think my life is sad. You think I'm a failure because I'm not married. Yet you have no problem living comfortably on the proceeds of that sad life. The cruises, the garden clubs, the reason you don't have to worry about outliving your savings, that's all because of me, the daughter you pity." "That's not fair," she stammered. "I have always been proud of you." "Your actions say otherwise," I replied coldly. "Your pride never seems to stop you from cashing the checks, though. By the way, I've also canceled the monthly $1,000 transfer to your account, and I'll be sending you a formal letter this week. You have 60 days to find a new financial advisor. I'm resigning." The gasp on the other end of the line was audible. It was a sound of genuine shock, the sound of someone realizing the ground beneath their feet was no longer solid. "You can't do that," Helen cried out, her voice rising in panic. "Amanda, you can't. How am I supposed to manage?" "The same way other people do, Mom," I said, my heart aching but my resolve firm. "You hire a professional. They'll charge a fee, of course. But I'm sure with the money you'll save on cruises, you'll be able to afford it." Sarah snatched the phone back. You're a monster, Amanda, a cold, selfish monster, after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I cut her off, my voice dangerously low. What exactly have you done for me, Sarah? Besides take my money and offer unsolicited, insulting advice about my life, you have taken a $50,000 loan you never intended to repay. You have lived for years with me paying for your car insurance and your phone bill. You have allowed your daughter to treat me with utter contempt while enjoying the benefits of my hard work. You haven't done anything for me. You have drained me, and the well is now dry. I stood up and walked over to my window, looking out at the city lights. My city, my life. Here is what is going to happen, I said, shifting into the calm, authoritative tone I used with my clients. You and your husband will call the phone company and set up your own account. You will secure your own car insurance. You will be responsible for your daughter's spending money and her tuition moving forward. Chloe's 529 plan, which I funded, has more than enough to cover her education, provided she learns to be a bit more frugal. I will not be authorizing any more payments, but the money is there for its intended purpose, education. As for you and Mom, you need to learn to live within your own means. I am done. The line was silent for a long moment. I could picture them, standing in my mother's kitchen, stunned into silence, the full reality of their situation finally dawning on them. The endless river of money had not just been dammed, it had been diverted permanently. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely a whisper, filled with a venomous rage. You will regret this. You'll die alone, and you will regret this. No, Sarah, I said softly, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time that day. I won't. Being alone is 1,000 times better than being used. Goodbye. I ended the call. I blocked her number. I blocked my mother's number. I sat down on my sofa, the wine glass cool against my hand, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed. The confrontation was over, and I had not just survived it, I had won. I had chosen myself. The days following the phone call were strangely quiet. It was a silence I had to get used to, like the hum of a refrigerator that you only notice once it stops. There were no more passive-aggressive texts from Sarah, no more gentle reminder emails from my mother about an upcoming bill. My phone, once a constant source of low-grade anxiety, became a tool for my own use again. The absence of their constant, low-level demands was like a weight lifting off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The first week was a detox. I resisted the urge to check my blocked messages, to wonder what they were doing or how they were coping. Part of me, the part conditioned by 42 years of being the caretaker, felt a pang of guilt. But then I would remember my mother's nod, Chloe's sneer, and Sarah's shriek of "How dare you?" And the guilt would evaporate, replaced by a cool, clear certainty that I had done the right thing. To help solidify my new reality, I called my old friend David. He was a corporate lawyer with a shark's grin and a heart of gold, one of the few people in my life who saw me for who I was, not what I could provide. I met him for dinner and laid out the entire story, from the birthday dinner to the final phone call. He listened intently, his expression shifting from disbelief to outrage to, finally, a deep, respectful admiration. When I finished, he raised his glass. "To Amanda," he said, "the CEO of her own damn life, I'm proud of you. That took guts." "I'm not sure it was guts," I admitted. "I think it was just exhaustion. I ran out of excuses for them." David's legal mind immediately started seeing the potential fallout. Sarah might try to make a claim on that $50,000 loan, he warned, or your mother could contest your resignation as her advisor. "Let them," I said with a shrug, feeling a surprising lack of fear. "The loan was verbal, there's no paper trail, and I'm giving Mom a 60-day notice with a full accounting. I've covered my ethical bases. For the first time, I'm not afraid of their drama." He was right to be cautious, though. About a month later, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Sarah. It was a blustering, poorly written demand for the immediate reinstatement of family support, and made a vague, unenforceable claim on the verbal investment in her yoga studio. I forwarded it to David, who laughed out loud when he read it. He drafted a crisp, professional response that shut them down completely, citing the lack of any written agreement and politely suggesting that any further communication should go through him. We never heard from her lawyer again. The true aftermath, however, wasn't legal. It was personal. It was the process of redirecting all the energy, time, and money I had once poured into my family back into myself. The $1,250 a month that had been going to my mother and the phone company was now automatically invested into a travel and adventure fund. I booked the 2-week trip to Japan I had always dreamed of. I started taking pottery classes on Tuesday nights. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected because I was always too busy managing a family crisis. My life began to fill with things that brought me joy, not obligation. The silence in my condo no longer felt empty, it felt peaceful. I found that I actually enjoyed my own company. My sad, single life, as Chloe had called it, was actually rich and fulfilling. I had great friends, a career I loved, and the freedom to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. What was so sad about that? 6 months later, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was an apology. It was from Chloe. Her tone was completely different from the arrogant teen at the restaurant. It was hesitant, awkward, and surprisingly sincere. She told me that the last few months had been a huge reality check. She had to get a part-time job on campus to pay for her own expenses. She saw how stressed her parents were now that they had to manage their own finances, and she admitted she had never understood where the money had come from. She apologized for her comment at my birthday dinner. "I was a stupid, entitled kid who had no idea what you did for us," she wrote. "I know I don't deserve it, but I hope one day you can forgive me." I sat with her email for a long time. It was the first crack of remorse, the first sign that my actions had forced a change in perspective. I replied with a short, simple message. "Thank you for your apology, Chloe. I appreciate it. I wish you the best." I offered no reconciliation, no hint that the door was open to how things were before. Forgiveness was one thing, forgetting was another. She needed to build her own life now, just as I was rebuilding mine. I never heard from my mother or Sarah directly again. I learned through the grapevine that Sarah had to take on more yoga classes and her husband got a second job to make ends meet. My mother had to sell her house and move into a smaller, more affordable condo. They were surviving, just without the luxuries I had once provided. Their lives were harder, but they were now their own. In a way, I had given them the gift of self-reliance, even if they would never see it that way. As for me, my worth is no longer up for debate. It's not determined by my relationship status or by the approval of my family. My worth is in my integrity, my resilience, and my ability to build a life of peace and purpose on my own terms. I am single, I am successful, and I am happy. And there is absolutely nothing sad about that.